Well, hello, BookTube. David here. Welcome back to my channel, and today I'm going to start a series of videos. I just started reading The Good Stuff, Adventures in Science Fiction in the Grand Tradition, edited by Gardner Dozois. And I'm enjoying it tremendously. I loved his introduction here. In the very first story by A.E. Van Vogt, called The Rull, is excellent. Nice, action-oriented fun. And so what my plan is I'm going to, each day-ish, read the little introduction that he gives to each author. Because I found that to be absolutely fascinating. And then just give very, very brief thoughts on the story that I've read. So we have A.E. Van Vogt. A.E. Van Vogt was one of the first genre writers ever to publish an actual science fiction book, at a time when science fiction as a commercial publishing category did not yet exist, and almost all science fiction writers, even later giants such as Robert A. Heinlein, were able to publish novels only as serials in science fiction magazines. It's indicative of the prestige and popularity that Van Vogt would claim at the time when he was one of the first authors to whom publishers would turn when taking the first tentative steps toward establishing science fiction as a viable publishing category, which makes it all the more ironic that his work is all but forgotten today by most readers in the genre that he helped shape. Van Vogt's stories were more complex, ornate, and recomplicated than the work of many of his predecessors from the super science days of the 30s. His most famous piece of writing advice is that you should throw a new idea into a story every 500 words, a theory he seems to have consciously tried to apply to his own work. Van Vogt upped the stakes for space opera in the late 40s and early in the mid-50s with works like The Voyage of the Space Beagle, The Weapon Shops of Isher, The World of Null A, Slan, and The War Against the Rull, increasing the imagination ante that you had to come up with in order to sit down at the high-stakes table and play with the big boys, much as Alfred Bester and Jack Vance would do toward the end of the 50s, Cordwainer Smith and Frank Herbert would do in the mid-60s, and Samuel R. Delany would do in the late 60s. Nobody, however, with the possible exception of Bester of The Stars My Destination, who was himself clearly influenced by Van Vogt, ever came close to matching Van Vogt for headlong, breakneck pacing, or for the electric, crackling, paranoid tension with which he was capable of suffusing his work. As should be more evident in the story that follows, which gives us one of the classic science fiction situations. A man pitted against an alien in a situation where there is no escape, and to lose the struggle is to die, and where both adversaries are willing to do whatever it takes in order to win. Van Vogt is the author of 65 books, including, in addition to those named above, The Empire of the Atom, The Wizard of Lynn, Players of Null A, Null A3, Book of Thoth, The Weapon Makers, The House That Stood Still, Masters of Time, The Universe Makers, Quest for the Future, Computer World, and The Silky, among many others. In 1996, he was honored with a long-overdue Grandmaster Nebula Award for Life Achievement. Most of Van Vogt's works is long out of print and usually unfindable, but by the time you read these words, a reprint of one of his best-known novels, Slan, should be available as a trade paperback from Tor, and The Voyage of the Space Beagle, a landmark volume that, among other distinctions, was one of the chief inspirations for the original Star Trek series, and was a seminal influence on the movie Alien as well, should be available as part of a 3-novel omnibus volume, matched with novels by Poul Anderson and Barry N. Malzberg from White Wolf Borealis called 3 in Space, White Wolf Rediscovery Trio No. 2. We can only hope that more of Van Vogt's books will come back into print again in the days ahead. I myself would particularly like to see The War Against the Rull, one of my favorite Van Vogt books, and back again in print. Although a good historical case could be made for reprinting a half-dozen other Van Vogt titles as well. So this one was called The Rull in there, and as the introduction mentioned, it's just a really interesting premise where you've got one man against one alien creature, and both are fighting for survival with everything that they have available to them. And it's really, really interesting and fast-paced, adventurous, punchy. Those words all really, really well describe Van Vogt's writing in this story, and it was a fantastic way to kick off this anthology here. And it's, I think that he was talking in the introduction about there being a newer Good Stuff volume that would be coming out. So this goes from post-World War II to early 70s. And so that next volume was going to take from mid-70s onward. And I'd love to get my hands on that. I can already tell I'm going to love this volume. If you haven't read anything by A.E. Van Vogt, The Hull is a fantastic place to start. So, thank you, BookTube.